Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Dean William pulled into the driveway at 6:30, same as every weekday for the past 8 years. The suburban Connecticut house looked perfect in the autumn twilight. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the kind of place that belonged on a postcard. He'd bought it because Veronica said it was essential for Evan to grow up somewhere stable, somewhere respectable. Her father had helped with the down payment, a fact Herbert Parrish never let him forget. Inside, Evan sat at the kitchen table, pushing chicken nuggets around his plate. At 7 years old, he should have been chattering about school, superheroes, something. Instead, he barely looked up when Dean walked in. "Hey, champ." Dean ruffled his son's hair, noting how Evan tensed at the gesture. "How was your day?" "Fine." The word came out flat, rehearsed. Veronica emerged from the hallway. Phone pressed to her ear, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the case. She'd been a paralegal when they met, sharp and ambitious. Now she spent most days at the country club or shopping with her mother. "Dad, I need to go. Dean's home." She ended the call without waiting for a response. "Dinner's ready. I'm going to my book club." "Again? That's 3 times this week. It's an important selection. We're reading Tolstoy." She grabbed her purse, kissed the air near Evan's head. "Be good for Daddy." The door closed before Dean could ask which Tolstoy. He suspected she couldn't name one either. Dean worked as a documentary filmmaker, specializing in investigative pieces for streaming platforms. His last project, exposing a pharmaceutical company's manipulation of clinical trials, had won awards and made enemies. It meant irregular hours, intense research periods, but it paid well enough that Veronica didn't need to work. She'd quit the paralegal job 2 years ago, right after her father suggested it. He sat across from Evan, studying his son's withdrawn posture. "Want to shoot some hoops after dinner?" Evan shook his head, kept his eyes down. "Minecraft." Another shake. "Buddy, you could talk to me about anything. You know that, right?" Evan's fork clattered against the plate. "May I be excused?" Dean watched him retreat upstairs, that same mechanical politeness that had been growing for months. He'd attributed it to school stress, maybe social issues, but this felt different, deeper. Later that night, Dean found Evan in bed, covers pulled to his chin despite the warm September evening. He sat on the edge of the mattress, the way he had since Evan was a baby. "Dad," Evan's voice cracked. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." Do you love me?" The question hit like a punch. "Evan, of course I do. More than anything in this world. Why would you even?" "Grandpa says people only love you if you're good, if you follow rules. He says I'm not good enough." Dean's jaw tightened. Herbert Parrish had always been demanding, critical, but this crossed a line. "Your grandfather is wrong. I love you no matter what. Good grades, bad grades, mistakes, successes. None of that changes how I feel about you." Evan's eyes welled up. "Really? Really?" Dean reached out to pull him into a hug. Evan flinched. It was automatic, instinctive, a full-body recoil from his father's raised hand. Dean froze, watching his son's face cycle through fear, shame, and resignation. "Evan," his voice came out strangled. "I would never hurt you. Never. You know that, right?" "I know, Dad." Evan's whisper barely carried across the small room. "But Grandpa does." The world tilted. "Does what?" Instead of answering, Evan slowly lifted his shirt. Belt marks. Fresh ones. Angry red welts crisscrossing his small back in a pattern Dean recognized from his research on child abuse cases. Some were new, but others had begun to yellow and fade. Evidence of repeated, systematic beatings. Dean's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, photographing the evidence with clinical precision. Years of documentary work overriding the rage, threatening to consume him. Every angle, every mark. Evidence. Always evidence first. How long? He could barely form the words. "Mom drops me there every day after school." "While you're working?" Evan's voice was small, matter of fact, like he was describing the weather. "Grandpa says it's because I need discipline. But he's too soft on me. That mom knows what's best." Every day. Dean thought back. Veronica had suggested it 6 months ago. Evan could do homework at her parents' house, save money on after-school care, spend time with family. He'd agreed, grateful she was taking initiative with her son's care. He'd been played. If I cry, it's worse. If I tell, it'll be worse. Evan's composure cracked. He says he'll leave us if you know I'm bad. He says Mom will choose him over me. He says, "Stop." Dean pulled his son close, careful of the injuries. None of that is true. None of it. You're not bad. You're not the problem. He is. Evan cried, then really cried, the kind of release that spoke of months of held-in terror. Dean held him, mind racing through possibilities. Call the police, but Veronica would be implicated. She'd known. She'd been delivering their son to his abuser daily. Call a lawyer first. Document everything. Build a case so airtight that Herbert Parrish would never see daylight again. After Evan finally fell asleep, Dean descended to his home office and pulled up his contact list. Philip Perkins answered on the second ring. "Dean, it's almost midnight. I need a lawyer. Family law. The best you know. Tonight, if possible." Philip's tone shifted, professional mode engaging. "What happened?" "My father-in-law has been beating my son. My wife has been facilitating it. I have photographs. I need full custody, restraining order, and I need to bury them both so deep they never surface." Silence. Then, "I'll make calls. Don't confront anyone. Don't tip your hand." "How old are the injuries?" "Fresh. Hours old. And older ones, maybe a week." "Hospital. Now, get a medical examination on record. I'll text you an attorney's name. She's a shark, handles high-profile custody cases. Then we call CPS and the police in that order." "Dean, do not contact your wife or her father." "Not yet." But Dean was already dialing another number as Philip talked, his documentary instincts taking over. Roland Connor picked up with his usual gravelly greeting. "You still have access to that mobile production van? The one from the corruption piece?" "Yeah, it's in storage." "What?" "I need it at my father-in-law's house tomorrow. And I need you to film everything that happens." "Dean, what?" "I'm going to make Herbert Parrish famous." The emergency room physician, a tired woman named Dr. Morrison, documented 12 separate injuries in various stages of healing. Blunt force trauma consistent with a belt or similar object. Patterns suggested repeated abuse over several months. She was legally obligated to report, she explained, handing Dean copies of the medical report with sympathetic eyes. Dean sat in the hospital hallway at 3 in the morning, Evan asleep in the examination room, and opened his laptop. Years of investigative journalism had taught him one thing. Everyone left a trail. He started digging into Herbert Parrish's past. What he found in the first hour made his blood run cold. Herbert Parrish, retired family court judge, pillar of the community, generous donor to children's charities. 3 marriages. 2 deceased wives, one in a car accident, one from a fall down the stairs. Veronica's mother, Carol, was the 3rd. Large life insurance payouts. A sealed case from 20 years ago involving a neighbor's complaint of screaming from the Parrish residence. Nothing ever charged. Dean cross-referenced property records. Herbert owned a lake house in Vermont, purchased after his first wife's death. A hunting cabin in the Adirondacks. A condo in Florida. All places Veronica had mentioned wanting to visit someday, places her father went alone. He pulled up his network of sources, journalists, investigators, people who owed him favors from past documentaries. Sent out feelers. Asked about Herbert Parrish, retired judge, Greenwich, Connecticut area. Anything unusual, anything sealed, anything whispered. The responses started coming in before dawn. By the time Andrea Lansing, the attorney Philip had recommended, arrived at 7 a.m., Dean had compiled a file that went far beyond simple child abuse. He handed it to her in the hospital conference room, watched her expression shift from professional concern to genuine shock. "Mr. William, where did you get this?" "I'm an investigative journalist. It's what I do." She flipped through pages detailing financial irregularities in Herbert's court cases, suggesting bias in custody decisions favoring mothers. Mothers who later made substantial donations to Herbert's preferred charities. A pattern of sealed complaints from former court employees. 3 separate mentions of concerning behavior in judicial review notes buried in archive files. We can't use most of this in a custody case. Chain of evidence, privacy laws. I'm not giving it to you for the custody case. Dean's smile was cold. I'm making a documentary. My father-in-law spent 30 years as a family court judge, destroying families while presenting himself as their savior. I'm going to show the world who Herbert Parrish really is. That's a separate matter from protecting your son. Everything's connected. I want full custody. I want a restraining order. I want Veronica's parental rights investigated. And while the legal system does its job, I'm going to do mine. I'm going to make sure Herbert Parrish's name becomes synonymous with everything he claimed to stand against. Andrea studied him. You understand this will get ugly. Your wife will fight. Her father has connections, money, influence. So do I. And I have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. And the ability to show it to millions of people. His phone buzzed. Roland, van's ready. Say the word. Dean typed back, tomorrow. His house. Sunrise. I want cameras rolling when I knock on his door. Then he called the number he'd been saving, the one he'd sworn he'd never use unless absolutely necessary. When Herbert Parrish answered, sleep fuzzy and irritated, Dean spoke with perfect calm. I'm coming over. Herbert's laugh was condescending, dismissive, everything Dean expected. For what? Veronica's not here. She stayed at our place last night. I know. I need to talk to you. Man to man. It's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Check your driveway. Silence. Dean could hear movement, footsteps, the sound of blinds being opened. When Herbert spoke again, his voice had changed completely. The arrogant judge replaced by something uncertain, almost afraid. What is this? What are you doing? In the Parrish driveway sat Roland's mobile production van, satellite dish extended, professional camera, equipment visible through the windows. Dean had parked his car blocking the garage. On the lawn, he placed a sign, simple and clear. Documentary in progress. Herbert Parrish. Family court judge, child abuser. I'm coming over, Dean repeated, and we're going to have a very public conversation about what you've been doing to my son. You can cooperate, or you can make this difficult. Either way, the cameras are rolling. You can't. This is harassment. I'll call the police. Please do. I've already called Child Protective Services. They'll be there in about 30 minutes. The police will be there in 20. And my lawyer is filing for an emergency custody hearing Monday morning. But first, you and I are going to talk. On camera. About everything. Herbert's breathing was ragged. Veronica won't let you take Evan. Veronica delivered our son to you knowing you were beating him. She's complicit. And when I'm done, everyone will know exactly what kind of family the Parrishes really are. Dean ended the call and looked at Andrea. Now we go to his house. Now it begins. The Parrish estate sprawled across 2 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, a Georgian colonial that screamed old money and older secrets. Dean pulled up behind the production van at 7:30, medical reports in hand. Evan safely with Philip's wife at an undisclosed location. Roland met him at the door. Cameras are live, streaming to secure cloud storage. Whatever happens, we have it recorded. Good, because Herbert Parrish is about to have the worst day of his life. The front door opened before Dean could knock. Herbert stood there, still in his robe, face mottled with rage. At 72, he maintained the imposing bearing of a man used to controlling courtrooms, used to being obeyed. But his eyes darted to the cameras, calculating. You're trespassing. I'm documenting a crime. There's a difference. Dean held up the medical report. 12 injuries. Multiple stages of healing. Pattern consistent with systematic abuse. Your grandson's injuries, Herbert. Want to explain that to the cameras? Get off my property before you what? Beat me like you beat Evan? Please. Try it. Give me more footage. Carol appeared behind her husband, face pale. Dean, what's happening? What is all this? Dean turned to her, something like pity in his expression. Your husband has been abusing Evan, beating him with a belt, for months. And Veronica knew. She was dropping him off here every day, knowing what would happen. Carol's hand went to her mouth. The shock looked genuine, but Dean had learned not to trust anything in this family. Herbert, tell me this isn't true. It's discipline, Herbert snapped. The boy is soft, undisciplined. His father fills his head with liberal nonsense. Someone had to teach him respect, teach him to be a man. Dean felt Roland stiffen beside him. The cameras were catching every word. You call beating a 7-year-old discipline? Dean's voice was deadly quiet. You call leaving welts and bruises on a child's back teaching respect? I call it necessary correction that you were too weak to provide. Veronica understood. She knew her son needed a firm hand. Where is she? Inside. Asleep. She came here last night to get away from you and your accusations. Then let's wake her up. Let's all have this conversation together. Herbert's hand shot out, gripping Dean's shoulder. It was a mistake. Dean had been waiting for contact, for Herbert to make the first physical move. He grabbed the older man's wrist, twisted just enough to make him release the grip, and stepped back. Don't touch me. You've put your hands on someone in my family for the last time. Police sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer. Herbert's face went from red to pale. You actually called them. I told you I would. CPS is right behind them. And then my lawyer is filing for an emergency custody order. But that's just the legal side, Herbert. The real show starts next week when my documentary airs. The judge who destroyed families. I think that's what I'll call it. I've been digging into your career. All those cases where you favored mothers who later donated to your charities. All those SEAL complaints. Your first 2 wives and their convenient deaths. It's all going to come out. You can't prove anything. I'm not in a courtroom, Herbert. I don't need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I just need to show enough to make people question, to make them wonder, to make sure that when they hear the name Herbert Parrish, they think child abuser instead of respected judge. 2 patrol cars pulled up, followed by an unmarked sedan, CPS. Dean watched Herbert's world crumble in real time, the realization that he couldn't judge his way out of this, couldn't intimidate or control the situation. Veronica stumbled out, hair disheveled, and stopped dead when she saw the scene. Dean, what are you doing here? Protecting our son. Something you stopped doing months ago. I don't know what he told you, but he didn't have to tell me anything. I saw the belt marks, Veronica. I took him to the hospital. We have medical documentation. And now I have your father on camera admitting to necessary correction of a 7-year-old child. Her face cycled through expressions, shock, fear, calculation. She chose wrong. Dad was just trying to help. Evan needed structure, discipline. You're always working, always gone. Someone had to step up. By beating him, by allowing your father to beat him. It wasn't beating. It was... There's no good way to finish that sentence, Veronica. 12 injuries. Documented by a physician. Reported to authorities. And now, captured on camera for millions of people to see. The lead police officer, a veteran named Martinez, approached with his notepad out. Someone want to tell me what's going on? Dean handed him the medical report. My son has been systematically abused by Herbert Parrish. My wife has been facilitating it by bringing him here daily. I have photographic evidence, medical documentation, and I just recorded Mr. Parrish admitting to physically disciplining my son. Martinez read the report, his expression darkening. He looked at Herbert. Mr. Parrish, we need to talk. Inside. I'm a retired judge. I know my rights. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer. That's fine, sir. But we still need to talk. As Martinez led Herbert inside, another officer stayed with Veronica. The CPS worker, a sharp-eyed woman named Kim Santos, approached Dean. Mr. William, I'm going to need to speak with your son. He's in a safe location. My lawyer has the address. We can arrange a meeting today, but I want it on neutral ground, not here. She nodded. That's acceptable. We'll also need to interview Mrs. William and Mr. Parrish separately. Dean watched Veronica's face as reality set in. She was going to be investigated. Her parental rights were in question. The perfect life she'd built on her father's money and influence was collapsing. Roland leaned in, voice low. We got everything. His admission, Veronica's justification, all of it. Good. Send copies to Andrea, to CPS, and keep the originals in 3 separate secure locations. This is just the beginning. By noon, Herbert Parrish had been arrested for felony child abuse. Veronica had been questioned for 3 hours about her knowledge and complicity. Emergency custody had been granted to Dean pending a full hearing. And Dean sat in his lawyer's office, watching Roland edit the first cut of what would become his most important documentary. This is powerful stuff, Andrea said quietly. But you know what's coming. They'll attack you. They'll say you manipulated the situation, that you're exploiting your son for views, that you're bitter about the marriage. Let them. I have evidence. I have the truth. And I have a platform to show it to the world. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've made a serious mistake. My father has friends in every courthouse in the state. You'll never work again. You'll never see Evan again. Back down now, and maybe we can make this go away. Veronica, still fighting, still believing her father's power would protect them. Dean showed the text to Andrea. Can we use this? Absolutely. It's witness intimidation. Save everything she sends. Another text. I'm sorry about Evan. But Dad was right that you're not strong enough to raise him properly. He needs discipline, structure, things you can't provide. Dean replied with just 4 words. See you in court. Then he turned to Roland. How fast can we finish this documentary? With what we have now, a week. But if you want to really bury them, we need more. We need the other victims. Then let's find them. Herbert Parrish spent 30 years on the bench. 30 years of families passing through his courtroom. Some of them must have stories. Some of them must have seen who he really was. Andrea cleared her throat. Before you go full investigative journalist, remember you're also a father in a custody battle. CPS is watching everything you do. Don't give them ammunition. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm researching a documentary about judicial corruption and child abuse. The fact that it involves my father-in-law is just unfortunate coincidence. She smiled grimly. I'll make sure to phrase it exactly that way in court. As Dean left the office, his phone rang. Herbert's lawyer, a silk-suited shark named Douglas Winters. Mr. William, I represent Herbert Parrish. My client wishes to discuss a resolution to this unfortunate misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Your client beat my son. The evidence is clear. Evidence that could be interpreted various ways. Evan is a rambunctious child. Injuries could have come from normal play, sports activities. My client simply provided childcare at your wife's request. The medical examiner says the injuries are consistent with systematic abuse using a belt or similar object. Medical examiners can be wrong. And your wife is prepared to testify that you've been unstable lately, obsessed with your work, neglectful of your family. She's concerned about Evan's safety in your care. Dean laughed, cold and humorless. Is this the best you have? Because I have medical records, photographs, video of your client admitting to disciplining Evan, and text messages from my wife confirming her knowledge and complicity. What do you have? I have a retired judge with an unblemished record and significant credibility. I have a concerned mother worried about her child. And I have connections in family court that will make your life very difficult. Then I guess we'll see each other in court, and in the media, and in the court of public opinion. I look forward to it, Mr. Winters. He ended the call and looked at Roland, who'd filmed the entire conversation from across the street. They're going to fight dirty. So will we. Dirtier. That evening, Dean sat with Evan in a hotel room. Andrea had advised against returning to the house until the custody situation was resolved. His son was quiet, picking at the pizza Dean had ordered. Am I in trouble? Evan finally asked. No, buddy. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. But Grandpa went to jail because of me. Grandpa went to jail because of what he did to you. That's on him, not you. Is Mom mad at me? Dean chose his words carefully. Mom made some bad choices. She's dealing with the consequences. But none of this is your fault. You're just a kid. Adults are supposed to protect you, not hurt you. Will I have to see Grandpa again? Not if I have anything to say about it. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure you never have to be afraid again. Evan crawled into his lap, something he hadn't done in months. I'm glad I told you, Dad. Me too, champ. Me too. As Evan fell asleep that night, Dean pulled up his laptop and continued his research. Herbert Parrish's past was a minefield of buried secrets, and Dean was going to excavate every single one. The documentary would be just the beginning. Monday morning brought the emergency custody hearing. Dean sat next to Andrea in the courthouse, not one of Herbert's old haunts, but a neutral venue in Hartford. Across the aisle, Veronica and Douglas Winters whispered urgently. Judge Marilyn Foster presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for protecting children above all else. Dean had researched her extensively. She'd overturned several of Herbert's decisions over the years, calling his reasoning troubling in her written opinions. Andrea presented the medical evidence, the photographs, the police report. Douglas tried to argue that the injuries were inconclusive, that Evan was prone to accidents, that Dean was fabricating a narrative to win custody in a deteriorating marriage. Then Andrea played the video. Herbert Parrish, on camera, admitting to necessary correction and firm discipline, explaining that Evan needed to be taught to be a man. The courtroom went silent as his words echoed. Judge Foster's expression hardened. "Mr. Winters, does your client dispute the authenticity of this video?" "Your Honor, the video was obtained without Mr. Parrish's consent on his private property." "That's not what I asked. Is it authentic?" Winters hesitated. "My client was ambushed under duress." "I'll take that as a yes." "Mrs. William, you were present during this recording?" Veronica stood, hands shaking. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you heard your father describe physically disciplining your son?" "It wasn't abuse. It was discipline. My father was helping to raise Evan properly, by beating him with a belt, by providing structure that his father doesn't." "Mrs. William, did you know your son had injuries consistent with belt marks?" Silence. "Mrs. William, answer the question." I may have seen some marks. But Evan is clumsy. He falls a lot." Andrea stood. "Your Honor, may I present text messages between Mrs. William and her mother, dated 2 months ago?" The messages appeared on the courtroom screen. Veronica to Carol. "Dad went too hard on Evan today. The marks will show." Carol's response. "Keep him in long sleeves until they fade. Don't tell Dean." Judge Foster's jaw tightened. "Mrs. William, you're telling me you didn't know about the abuse, but here's evidence you were actively concealing it from your husband?" Veronica's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. She shook her head. "I want to change my testimony. I want immunity." The courtroom erupted. Dean watched as Veronica made her play, the one he'd anticipated, throw Herbert under the bus to save herself. "Your Honor," Veronica continued, voice breaking, "my father has controlled me my entire life. I was afraid of him. When he said he needed to discipline Evan, I didn't know how to say no. I'm the victim here, too." Andrea objected immediately. "Your Honor, Mrs. William is attempting to rewrite history. She actively participated in delivering her son to his abuser and conceal the evidence. She even texted her husband threats about never seeing Evan again just 2 days ago." Judge Foster held up her hand. "I'll hear from the child." "Mr. William, where is Evan?" "In a safe location with my friend's family, Your Honor. I didn't want to subject him to this environment." "Understandable, but I need to speak with him. We'll recess until this afternoon. I want Evan here at 2 p.m., and I'll interview him in chambers." Evan sat in Judge Foster's chambers, small and scared, but braver than Dean had ever seen him. The judge spoke gently, asking about his days at Grandpa's house, about how he got his injuries, about whether he felt safe with his mother. Dean watched through the one-way glass, Andrea beside him. Evan told the truth, all of it. How Grandpa said he was bad, how Mom told him not to cry, how he'd learned to hide the bruises. How he loved his dad, but was scared to tell him because Grandpa said Dad would leave. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Foster's decision was swift. Temporary full custody to Mr. Dean William. Mrs. Veronica William will have supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation and completion of parenting classes. All contact between the child and Herbert Parrish is suspended indefinitely pending criminal trial. This court finds substantial evidence of abuse and neglect. Veronica's face crumpled. Douglas Winters immediately filed an appeal, but Dean knew it would go nowhere. The evidence was too strong, the video too damning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dean had tipped off a few trusted colleagues, knowing the story would break anyway. Better to control the narrative. "Mr. William, is it true your father-in-law is a retired judge?" "Yes. Herbert Parrish served as a family court judge for 30 years. "And you're making a documentary about this case?" "I'm making a documentary about judicial corruption and child abuse in the family court system." My son's case is part of a larger pattern I've uncovered. What pattern? Dean smiled. Watch the documentary. It releases next month. The next 3 weeks were a blur of investigation, interviews, and evidence gathering. Dean's documentary team worked around the clock, tracking down families who'd passed through Herbert's courtroom. They found 23 willing to talk. The stories were horrifying. Custody stripped from fit fathers and given to abusive mothers who later donated to Herbert's charities. Cases sealed without explanation. Children who disappeared into foster care despite family members begging to take them. And always, Herbert Parrish presiding, righteous and untouchable. One interview stood out. A woman named Sarah Mitchell, whose ex-husband had beaten her and their daughter. She'd fled to a shelter, gotten a protective order, built a case. Herbert Parrish had granted the husband full custody, calling Sarah hysterical and unfit. 3 months later, the daughter was hospitalized with a broken arm. 6 months after that, the husband was arrested for domestic violence. He destroyed my life, Sarah said, tears streaming. I lost my daughter for 2 years because Herbert Parrish decided I wasn't credible. And I found out later my ex-husband had made a substantial donation to Parrish's favorite charity. Dean documented everything. Bank records showing donations from parties who'd won favorable rulings. Sealed court files obtained through FOIA requests and investigative loopholes. Pattern after pattern of corruption masked as judicial discretion. Meanwhile, Herbert's criminal case proceeded. The prosecution was building a solid case. The medical evidence, Dean's video, Carol's reluctant testimony that she'd heard Herbert hitting Evan. Douglas Winters tried every trick, but the evidence was overwhelming. Veronica attempted to play victim, claiming she'd been controlled and manipulated by her father. But Dean's lawyer produced evidence of her active participation. Not just the text messages, but bank records showing she'd received monthly payments from Herbert's accounts, payments that increased after Evan started going there for after-school care. She was being paid to deliver him, Andrea explained to Dean. $500 a month, deposited like clockwork. She wasn't a victim. She was complicit. Dean felt sick. His wife had sold their son's safety for money, for her father's approval, for reasons he might never fully understand. The divorce papers were filed within days. 4 weeks after that terrible night, when Evan lifted his shirt, Dean sat in a screening room with his production team. The documentary was finished. 90 minutes of devastating testimony, damning evidence, and Herbert Parrish's own words condemning him. The judge who destroyed families would premiere on one of the major streaming platforms in 3 days. Advanced reviews were already calling it explosive, necessary viewing, an indictment of the family court system. But first, Dean had one more move to make. He called Herbert's lawyer. I want to meet with your client. Absolutely not. Mr. Parrish has been advised not to speak with you. Even if I'm offering a deal. Silence. What kind of deal? A private screening of my documentary. Just him, me, and the truth. If he watches it and still wants to fight, fine. But I think he should see what's coming. Why would you do that? Because I want him to know exactly what he's lost, what he threw away. And I want to see his face when he realizes there's no way out. The meeting was arranged in a conference room at Douglas Winters' law office. Herbert sat across from Dean, aged a decade and a month. House arrest, an impending trial had stripped away his judicial bearing, leaving only a bitter old man. Dean started the documentary. Herbert watched his career disintegrate on screen. Interview after interview, family after family, all testifying to his corruption, his cruelty, his abuse of power. The financial evidence, the sealed cases, the pattern of favoring donors over children's welfare. And then, near the end, Evan's testimony. Judge Foster had allowed Dean to use the audio from the Chambers interview. Evan's small voice describing the beatings, the fear, the pain. Describing how his own mother had told him to lie, to hide, to protect Grandpa because he was just trying to help. Herbert's hands shook. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself. I'm just showing people who you really are. My reputation is built on the suffering of children and families you destroyed for profit. That reputation deserves to die. I gave Veronica everything. I built this family. You built an empire of abuse and corruption. And now it's over. Herbert looked at Dean with something almost like pleading. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you to not release this. I don't want your money. I want you to plead guilty. I want you to allocate in open court to what you did to Evan, to all those families. I want you to admit everything. Never. I won't destroy myself for you. Dean stood, gathering his laptop. Then enjoy the premiere. 3 million subscribers will be watching. By the end of the week, everyone will know the name Herbert Parrish, and they'll know exactly what it means. As he reached the door, Herbert's voice stopped him. You've destroyed your marriage. Veronica will never forgive you. Veronica chose to protect you instead of her own son. The marriage was already destroyed. I'm just making sure Evan never has to be afraid again. He'll resent you for this, for exposing the family like this. Dean turned back. Maybe, but he'll be alive and safe to resent me. That's more than you would have given him. The documentary dropped on a Friday morning. By noon, it was trending #1. By evening, the Attorney General had announced an investigation into Herbert Parrish's entire judicial career. By the next morning, 3 more families had come forward with complaints. Dean watched the response from his laptop while Evan played video games beside him. His son was slowly returning to normal, laughing, joking, being a kid. Therapy helped. Distance from the Parrish family helped more. Veronica had asked for a meeting. Dean agreed, with Andrea present and everything recorded. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect veneer cracked beyond repair. I want to explain. There's nothing to explain. You knew. You participated. You chose your father over our son. I was scared. You don't understand what it was like growing up with him. Then you should have protected Evan even more fiercely. Instead, you fed him to the same monster. I want another chance. With Evan. With you. Dean almost laughed. We're getting divorced. You'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation after the investigation concludes. And me? I'm done. I spent 8 years building a life with you, and you spent the last 6 months torturing our son. I loved you. No, you love what I provided. Stability, success, a chance to escape your father while still keeping his approval. You love having your cake and eating it too. But love? Real love protects. Real love sacrifices. Real love doesn't trade a child's safety for money and approval. Veronica left in tears. Dean felt nothing. Herbert Parrish's trial began 3 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical reports, video footage, testimony from Carol, who'd filed for divorce and turned state's evidence, and Evan's own words. The prosecution built a methodical case. But it was the testimony of Sarah Mitchell and the other families from the documentary that truly buried him. One by one, they described how Herbert had destroyed their lives, separated them from their children, ruled from the bench with cruelty and corruption. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts of child abuse. Guilty on felony assault. Guilty on corruption charges stemming from the documentary's revelations. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Foster, specially appointed to preside over the case, looked down at Herbert Parrish with cold disdain. Mr. Parrish, you spent 30 years in a position of sacred trust. Families came before you at their most vulnerable, seeking justice and protection for their children. Instead, you abused that trust. You took bribes disguised as donations. You separated children from fit parents. And you inflicted physical and psychological torture on your own grandson. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison on the abuse charges to run consecutively with 10 years for corruption. You will also pay restitution to the 23 families identified in the investigation, totaling $800,000. Your judicial pension is forfeit. You are permanently barred from any position of authority over children. Herbert stood silent, broken. The man who'd once commanded courtrooms with absolute power was led away in handcuffs. Dean watched from the gallery, Evan beside him. His son squeezed his hand. Is it over, Dad? Yeah, champ. It's over. Veronica's case was separate. The prosecution offered a deal, testimony against Herbert in exchange for suspended sentence and probation. She took it, admitting on the stand that she'd knowingly delivered Evan to be abused, that she'd concealed the injuries, that she'd accepted payment from her father. Her testimony sealed Herbert's fate, but destroyed any remaining sympathy for her. The court granted Dean full custody. Veronica was allowed supervised visitation once a month, contingent on completing therapy and parenting classes. She never showed up to the first visitation, or the second. By the third missed appointment, Evan stopped asking about her. "Is Mom ever coming back?" he asked one night. "I don't know, buddy, but you have me, and you have people who love you. That's what matters." Carol Parrish reached out through lawyers, wanting to establish a relationship with Evan. Dean was cautious, but Andrea advised allowing supervised visits. Carol had cooperated fully with prosecutors, had divorced Herbert, had entered therapy herself. The first visit was awkward. Carol brought cookies and apologies, unable to meet Evan's eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you. I should have stopped him." Evan, with the resilience of children, just shrugged. "It's okay, Grandma. You were scared too." Dean watched carefully, but Carol seemed genuine. Over time, monthly visits became regular. She was trying to rebuild, to atone. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. The judge who destroyed families won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked a nationwide conversation about judicial accountability. Dean received offers for book deals, speaking engagements, consulting on family court reform legislation. But the most important outcome was simpler. Evan started smiling again. 1 year after that terrible night, Dean sat at Evan's baseball game, watching his son pitch with confidence he'd never shown before. Roland sat beside him, camera ready to capture the moment. "You know the kid's going to see the documentary someday," Roland said. "I know. And when he does, I'll tell him the truth, that I did what I had to do to protect him. That sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. He'll understand. You're a good father, Dean." "I'm trying to be." Evan struck out the last batter and ran off the field, grin splitting his face. He crashed into Dean's arms, sweaty and happy and whole. "Did you see that, Dad? Did you see?" "I saw, champ. You were amazing. Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely." As they walked to the car, Evan chattered about the game, about school, about the science project he was excited about. Normal kid things. Beautiful, mundane, normal things. Dean's phone buzzed. An email from the Attorney General's office. 17 more cases under review from Herbert's tenure. The investigation was expanding. More families getting justice. He deleted it without reading the details. That was someone else's fight now. His job was simpler. Be there for his son. Protect him. Love him. Show him that families could be built on truth instead of control, on love instead of fear. Herbert Parrish died in prison 3 years into his sentence. Heart attack, the report said. Dean felt nothing when he heard. No satisfaction, no grief. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had truly closed. Veronica sent a card on Evan's 10th birthday. Dean gave it to him, letting him decide whether to open it. Evan looked at it for a long moment, then tossed it in the trash. "I'm good, Dad. I have everything I need." And he did. They both did. Years later, when Evan was applying to colleges, he wrote his admissions essay about resilience, about his father's courage, about learning that sometimes the right thing means standing alone against everyone you thought you could trust. He got accepted to every school he applied to. Dean read the essay in his son's dorm room, helping him move in, and felt tears he didn't bother to hide. "You did good, champ." Evan hugged him. "I had a good teacher." The documentary still played, still sparked conversations, still helped families recognize abuse and find their own courage to speak up. Herbert Parrish's name lived on, but not as the respected judge he'd wanted to be remembered as. He was a cautionary tale, a warning, a symbol of everything the system should protect against. And in a suburban house in Connecticut, a father and son built a new life from the ashes of the old one. Built it on truth, on love, on the simple radical act of protecting the vulnerable instead of hiding behind power. Dean William had made many documentaries in his career, exposing corruption and injustice. But his greatest achievement wasn't on screen. It was the healthy, happy, thriving young man who called him Dad. That was the real victory. That was the story that mattered most. And every time Evan smiled without fear, every time he raised his voice without hesitation, every time he stood up for himself with confidence, That was Dean's revenge on Herbert Parrish. The old judge had tried to break a child's spirit. Instead, he'd forged it into something stronger than he could ever destroy. That was justice. That was triumph. That was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.